Welcome to my channel about writing stuff. My name's Camille, and today we're going to talk about Orson Scott Card's M.I.C.E Quotient. I am getting over a cold, so I apologize in advance for sounding like death. But let's get into it. If you don't know who Orson Scott Card is, he's a pretty well-known sci-fi author. He's the author of Ender's Game. He's also one of the judges for the Writers of the Future contest, and he does have a science fiction magazine, the Intergalactic Medicine Show, I think. So just a few points about him. There is some controversy surrounding this author, but for the purpose of this video, I want to separate art from artist because this M.I.C.E Quotient idea that he sort of coined is very helpful. This is going to be the first of my plotting series videos, so let's get into it. Now, I love this M.I.C.E Quotient idea when I'm first starting about plot because it gives me this overarching idea of what my story is about. So M.I.C.E is an anagram, and it stands for these 4 parts. Orson says that, all good stories have at least some quantity of these 4 parts. And the 4 parts are, the M stands for milieu, which is your setting, your world. This sort of thing is very prevalent in fantasy or sci-fi, but it's also pretty important in contemporary work. It's about how the setting and the world influences the character and vice versa. And then there is the I, which stands for an idea story. This is the knowledge that your characters and your reader would need to gain to get from point A to point B. This sort of thing is prevalent in, say, mystery. And then there's C, which is character. Very internal, this one. It's not necessarily what your characters do, but why they do what they do. And then there is the event story, and this is what happens and why. This is very much, the way that I see it, it's very much the inciting incident, like the big kickoff points. So Orson goes into detail about this M.I.C.E Quotient idea. He goes very in depth by using the Wizard of Oz as an example. So I'm going to not dig too deep into this, but I am just going to hit some key points. So the big thing about the M.I.C.E Quotient is your story is essentially made up of these 4 parts in certain quantities. But what's a big help for me is the order in which you introduce these elements is the order in which you would close them in your short story or in your novel. So giving a generic sort of example, say you want to open your story with a character. So you have a character who is dissatisfied in some way. Let's say that, she wants to travel, she wants to see the world, but she's stuck at home taking care of her siblings. So that is going to be the base of our character story, or the character part of the story. And then let's say we want to go into the event. Let's say that she has a younger brother who runs away. So inciting incident, event story. Let's say the brother runs away to join like some civil war that's happening. And then that would lead us into our milieu setting. So our main character goes after her little brother, experiences the world, struggles because the world's in the middle of this civil war, and it's how the world affects the character and how the character affects the world and all the interesting parts of the world. And then we go into the idea story, or the idea part of the story. So the sister, the main character, needs to find out where the brother is. She needs to ask questions, interview people, gain this knowledge to kind of find out where he went so she can find him. So that's the order in which we'd open the story. It'd be character, event, milieu, and idea. So then the first point that you would close out when you get to the end of your novel is the idea story. So the way that the story would essentially close is you would have the main character get enough knowledge to find her brother. She finds her brother. And then you would close out the world. So either they end up staying where they are, or they travel back to where they came from. And that would essentially close out the milieu, or the setting part of the story. And then to close out the event, it would be, keeping the brother there, or maybe he wants to run away again. And then you would close that out. And then you would close out character by either your character still being dissatisfied with her life, or finally being satisfied that she's seen the world. And that's why this is a plotting video, is because before I get into, the points and the character interactions, I like to have this base idea of, okay, this is how I want my story to open. And that way that can inform how my story closes. And this is a good way to write different sort of stories too. Typically, I always start with the character story. For me, character is most important, and I really like to dig into character motivation, so I usually start with a character story. And then I usually go into an event story, some sort of inciting incident to kick things off, and then I usually go into milieu and idea. That's my basic pattern that I go with, and it works out pretty well. But, say you want to open with an idea story. Maybe you have this mysterious magic, and if you open with an idea story, then that can be very intriguing to the reader. If you open with, the milieu story, that can also be very intriguing and mysterious to the reader. If you open with an event story, you might be saying that this is going to be a thriller or some sort of exciting story. But if you go this route, if you choose to start with an event, a milieu, or an idea story, your characters won't, or your reader may not be so invested because there's no character to latch onto. So especially if you're starting out, you're writing your first book, I highly recommend starting with a character story. Always start with a character and then jump into one of these other 3 points. But yeah, I don't have much else on this. That's pretty much all I got. I will link below to Orson Scott Card's in-depth sort of blog post where he goes point by point for these 4 things, walking you through the Wizard of Oz, which is very helpful, which is also my resource for today. And then next week, I'm going to jump into the 7-point story structure that I use to sort of do the skeleton of my novel. That is a Dan Wells thing. So tune in for that. I post new videos on Friday. I try to post new videos every Friday. But yeah, so that's all I got for you today. As always, for now, you should be writing stuff.